When most people think of water-powered mills, they may think of Mabry Mill just off the Parkway. Operational mills similar to this iconic landmark were once a common sight in Floyd County and a crucial part to the local economy, providing vital resources like flour and cornmeal to the county's residents. To preserve the history of these mills, I went around the county interviewing former mill workers to get their insight on what it was like when people relied on local mills. This is Looking Back.
I guess when I was about 10 years old, probably the first time I went to the mill by myself. I rode the wagon with Dad, I'm sure several times. And he always trusted me with his horses because he let me drive and stuff like that. And matter of fact, I started plowing corn when I was just young, 8, 10 years old. So when he finally trusted me with the horses, he said, you go to the mill and I'll stay home and cut wood or something like that. So I took off to the mill. And I couldn't have been over 10 years old because Miss Harris told me the mill closed in 57 now. I'm just going by her word. So I couldn't have been about 10 years old when I started the first trip. And of course, we always loaded the wagon the night before. And so I'd been about 10 years old when we first started. That was the first mill we went to, was the Grease Creek Mill. Then when it closed, then we started going to the Vaughn's Mill. I remember one time the Vaughn's Mill was closed to maybe put in a new engine or something like that. I had to make one trip to the Webb's Mill, which was a long ways off, up near Floyd. But one trip's all made with horses. Dad worked at a sawmill. He was a sawyer, and Dad never did drive until later in the years. And somebody would pick him up and go to the sawmill. He would saw, and of course we milked the cows early in the morning. And he would help, and then he'd come home of the evening. He would help milk the cows. But we made a living just with milk cows. Had about 12 to 15 most of the time, and that's where he got his little money. Just a paycheck every 2 weeks. And Mama sold eggs. So she had about 75 hens, and she sold eggs to the local store called the Mango Store. That's basically how we made a living. And raised everything we eat in the gardens. On the farm, we had at least 2 horses, and sometimes 3, and raised about 2 hogs each year. And my mother had about 75 old hens and old laid eggs, and that was a rooster too, and to give us a good run for our money. That's about all we had. We usually bought some hog feed, and it always came in different colorful sacks, and things of that nature. And she'd make her pillowcases out of those things, and sometimes she'd make clothes. She made shirts and girls' dresses out of the feed sacks that she bought the feed for the hogs with. Of course, the feed we put in the cow feed in was burlap sacks. And that'd been pretty rough to make a shirt out of, but we always bought the hog feed with floured sacks. The night before we went to the mill, I was loaded some corn and some hay and some bundles of oats and things like that, and headed off to the mill. And of course, the miller would always add some high protein feed, such as some had high protein, 300 or 400 pounds, and add minerals and salt and of course those good old smelling molasses to make it taste good, and we had a ground for the cows, and so they give good milk. Yeah, we fed our chicken just the corn and wheat and oats, and of course they's free range chickens. They had to range the whole farm, and we never put them in the chicken house except at night, and so they had everything to eat. And most of those eggs probably was made out of worms and bugs and things of that nature back in those days. That's what made them so good. Usually we went to the mill every week with a 1-horse wagon, but if we took 2-horse wagons, sometimes we stretched out 2 to 3 weeks, because you could haul a big load with 2 horses and the big wagon. And just depending on how many cows we had to feed. Sometimes we had 12, sometimes 15, somewhere thereabout. Yeah, about all the neighbors had the same thing we had. They didn't have as many cows as we did, and usually had 2 or 3. And of course they had baby calves to feed and stuff like that. And so they did the same thing. They would go to a local mill as well, but usually if it had 1 or 2 cows, they'd buy most of their feed rather than taking heavy ground. Yeah, back in the day, we was probably one of the last families that took horses to the mill. And of course, my dad always trusted me with his horses. I mean, a man's horses was his pride and joy. They took care of the horses well, and he always trusted me to take care of the horses. And of course, we'd load the wagon, as I said, the night before with corn and oats and some baled hay. And usually the baled hay, Dad would get somebody, a neighbor, to bale just a few bales of hay for the meal. For the most part, we stacked our hay. And of course, that'd been hard to take to the meal. And so we loaded the wagon the night before, and we backed into a shed to keep it dry, until the next morning. Of course, after milking time was over, I'd eat my breakfast with good old sausage and gravy and biscuits, and then Mom would pack me a lunch, and I'd hit the road. And on the way to the mill, I'd cut across the Rock Hill Road, and in wintertime, some places it'd be frozen over with ice. And I'd have to stop and put chains in the horses. And I know the people nowadays won't understand that, but what we did, had the horseshoes on the horses, had 4 nails on each side, and you could buy what called ice head nails, which the head was about 3/8 inch longer than the other regular nails. Regular nails was kind of recessed in the horseshoe. We take out 2 nails on each side and put in 4 nails in each shoe, so the horse would stand up on the ice. And of course, we get through the ice, and be on our merry way. And of course, we hit 787, hardtop road. By the time we got to the mill and back, most of the head, the nail would be worn off. And on the way back, you'd have to do the same thing. And I can't imagine a 10, 11-year-old boy this day and time doing that, because some kids nowadays wouldn't know which end to put the collar in the horse. But that was the way of life back then. And it may have been hard back in those days, and some people looked at it as being tough. But I look back now, and it was a good training period. Build your character. Sometimes back in those days, Dad would buy horse and mule feed, and kind of a little extra to feed the horses, because the horses had to work hard, plowing ground and everything. And I'd slip a handful in my mouth, and it was pretty good eating stuff. Had to give molasses in it, and here I am, 7, 8 years old, and it didn't kill me. So I guess a little bit of dirt along the way, or germs will probably give good medicine for the soul. A family depended on the mill, because the mill ground the wheat into flour and ground the corn into cornmeal, and without the mill, you couldn't have anything to feed your cattle to give milk. They couldn't really give good milk just to feed them fodder and just hay off the stack. But by giving them a good quality feed, many of those cows was able to produce about 3 gallons of milk out of milking. That's 60 gallons a day, and that's the way Dad made a living, not only working away at the sawmill, but he got a milk check every 2 weeks. And we had to push milk cans out with a wheelbarrow on the way to school and leave it side of the road, except on Saturday and Sunday. On Saturday and Sunday, of course, we hooked horses up and took the cans to the road with the horses. But those meals were very important to all families back in those days to sustain life. Dad always trusted me with his horses, and horses are like, I guess, people nowadays with a tractor or the best car they've got. He took care of the horses. I might add, this is Lady on this side, it's the left side, and Lady on this side and Strawberry on this side. And they weighed about 1,300 pounds. Strawberry did, and Lady weighed about 1,400 pounds. That was just a guess weight. And of course, I was so small that we had to climb up on a kind of a platform in order to put the harness on the horses back in those days. But we made a way of doing it. And horses are pretty tall, for like a 10, 11-year-old boy. But we was able to get the harness on the horses, and same way with when we getting ready to plow corn, anything like that. We had to always harness horses and climb up on something to do so. But that meal was, like I say, was very important back in those days, because not only fed our animals, but fed us as well, as we took the wheat and corn to the meal.
I'm Gene Vaughn, and I've been in the milling business for years of my younger life. I've been in the lawnmower, chainsaw business for 33 years, and I've been in the milling business, feed milling business, bulk feed delivery, up until about 1991, I think, was the last year that we did animal feed in bulk. And today, I'm still distributing dog food at 90 years old. My earliest memory of Vaughn's Mill was probably when I was about 4, 5 years old. It probably would be close. I like to see the machinery run, and I had a neighbor friend that was about the same age as me. He'd come up and we'd run up and down from the floors of the mill watching the machinery run and things of that nature, and we just had a good time playing in the mill. As far as working in it, I don't have no memory of really working, but I hung around in the mill a lot and did more playing in it than I did working. My mother spent a lot of time in the mill, and she would take me and go out and to the mill, and that's one of my earliest memories of being in the mill was with my mother.
Do you remember when your dad bought the mill?
No, I've been told that he bought it, I believe, in 1937, and of course I don't have no memory of that.
When did your dad retire from the mill?
He was probably somewhere close to 50, late 50s, I'll say. Me and Sammy Phillips took over from my dad when he retired. I didn't work in the mill any until I was out of high school, and that is full time in the mill. And then I was drafted into the Army in 1956 and spent 2 years in military duty, and come back and went to work in the mill in 1958. His nephew, Sammy Phillips, he come to live with us when he was a teenager, and my dad made a miller out of him, and he was a lifelong miller with the exception of World War II. He was in the Marines for 32 months. And when he was discharged from the Marines, he stayed in the milling business the rest of his life. And then he eventually bought the mill in Boonville, North Carolina, rebuilt a flour mill in it, and his last years in the milling business was in Boonville, North Carolina. He sold his interest in the mill to me when he went to Boonville. Just about everyone in the neighborhood around the mill had to come to the mill for corn, for cornbread, and flour for biscuits, and they brought their own grain and we ground it for them. And we got a percentage of the grain that they brought, because in those years money was not a very plentiful item, and the miller got 1/8 of grain for his pay for milling it, corn and wheat. 1/8 of had a bushel, measure it and take a called toll out of it. Had different size cups, a quart and a gallon container that you dipped it out, and had a box that we poured the grain out in the box. And during the war years, my dad would grind his toll up, and once a week he would go to Christiansburg and deliver to the stores on the way from the mill to Christiansburg. And then the money that he received for distributing his flour and cornmeal, he would buy other items and bring back to the mill to sell. There wasn't nothing at that time that people could work at except sawmills or farming, and there just wasn't all the jobs that in later years that become available, and that's about the only thing they had to look forward to make a living was what they could grow and produce off of the farm, and then sawmilling. Of course, as years went by, it got to be an occupation a lot of people worked at. Everybody had a milk cow and pigs to grow into hogs and butcher every year, and that's what they had to live on. Yeah, I can remember when people would come to the mill with a wagon with a yoke of oxen, and pulling a wagon, and then there was some that had a little sled that they would bring their grain to the mill with one horse pulling the sled. I would guess that the last times people come to the mill with horses pulling a wagon would probably be in the late 40s. Well, grass seed, not being very heavy for its volume, come in long woven bags. And lots of people would save those grass seed bags because they were long and they could fill them with corn or wheat and drape them over a horse's back. And then they get on the horse, some of them walk and lead a horse, and some of them would ride on the horse with it would be grain on each side of the horse, and in the middle there wouldn't be anything in it, those long grass seed bags. But lots of people use them to come to the mill with corn to grind. Feed, animal feed was mostly burlap bags, but that was a woven cotton bag. Seed companies shipped seeds in, and it worked good to drape it over the back of a horse that corn fall down on each side. And sometimes they would ride the horse, and sometimes they'd walk and lead a horse. I've seen corn brought in their wagons and sleds and horses, and some people carry a small bag on their shoulder. Well, we ground a lot of corn to people that bring where mice should eat only kernels and make corn for cornbread out of it anyway. If they brought it, we grind it. Some people would bring here corn in be a 1.5 ton truck and bring it loose and have to shovel it in the hammer mill with a scoop shovel off a truck. Some of them had dump beds on, they could raise it and helped a lot about shoveling it, but if you had to get up in a truck bed that was flat, wasn't a dump bed, you'd have to throw it from the back of the truck to where it went in the hammer mill, grind it. We had people that had high sides on their trucks and fill it up level to the top of the sides and take several hours to shovel load in and grind it, and then rebag it and mix other ingredients in it while it was in the feed mixers. In the winter time, it wasn't unusual for people to spend the better part of a day there. They would be lined up, maybe up to 6 to more people waiting for get grinding done. They had a stove with where it was warm, a place for them to sit down. Had snack foods if they once got hungry, something to eat. Well, they had that. We had drink machines in later years, and some of them would bring something from home with them to eat. Beginning, most everybody brought their own grain to grind, but in later years, when we got into bulk business, bulk feed business, we had to deliver it. And we did some deliver in bag feeds, but not a whole lot. But did an awful lot of feed delivery in bulk feed trucks. People that would build a box or buy a feed bin, we could fill them from a feed truck. I don't recall ever having a customer that we was ready to see come, and they were all pleasant people, and just enjoyed talking to them, and got along good with everyone. But as far as having difficult customers, I don't recall any.
So my name is Cephas Stoughton. I work at Vaughn's Mill. It started at age 23, and I worked there for 40 years. Then retired. But at the beginning, when I first started going by the mill, I was going to school. I was walking from my home, is probably a mile or a little over, across the hill, and I'd walk by the mill as I went down to the storehouse there to catch the school bus. So anyway, as I go by the mill, I just look at the people there with maybe a horse and wagon or horses and a sled behind it and getting stuff ground. But at that time, I didn't realize I would be working at the mill. But anyway, I went to work at Bassett Furniture Company at the age of, 18. And I would have went to work on Labor Day. And I worked 5 years, and I quit the furniture factory, and I went to Vaughn's Mill and went to work for them. I would have went to work for them on Labor Day, but they were off that day. But being the people that they were, they paid me for that day anyhow. I hadn't even started work for them. But anyway, I worked there, like I said, for 40 years. But as a kid growing up, we grew our own corn, and we'd shell it off and put it behind an old wood stove and dry it out. And I'd put it on my shoulder and carry it across the hill to the mill and let them grind it. But at the time, didn't have to have money to do it. They would take part of your grain to, I was getting out what percentage it was, but they took part of the grain for grinding the mill. So then it would take it back to the house, you know. So we did that for years. But as I was going to school, I kept getting larger and larger, I reckon, needed more room. So they built a section across the creek. And as I come by one day, they had a piece of 2x6 laying there, so I picked it up and took it home with me, and I wheeled me a little squirrel out of it. And I still had it when I got married at the age of 23, but I don't know what happened to it since then, but anyway, it disappeared, but it's been a long time ago. But anyway, that's, as I went to work over there, the people would bring their grain in, and some of them would have corn, the grind for cornmeal, and then they'd have corn that they would grind for their cattle and mix minerals and molasses in it and take it back. And so as it went on, then they got more and more dairy people coming in and getting bigger and bigger, and then they finally had to get a bulk truck and take it out in bulk and put it in the bins. Yeah, well, when I first went to work there, and it's in the early 60s, they had people bringing in the stuff to grind, and mostly we ground feed for them, make feed out of their grain that they brought, and we'd put minerals and molasses and salt and stuff that in it, and sometimes soybean to build protein. And then as it went on, then they got to making dairy feed and hog feed and stuff for the people to buy. So that kept growing. And but anyway, that's mainly when I first started going there. That's what we did. And as far as the question was about what was the hard part, well, a lot of the lifting. I know as it went on and the business growed, we had a guy down at the other side of Floyd would order 100 bags of ground corn, 100-pound bags. And time you carry that back to the back of the truck and carry it into the barn, that was pretty hard for 100 bags of 100-pound bags of feed. But when I started work down there, it was 5 days a week and a half a day on Saturdays, 9 hours a day and up to 12 o'clock on Saturday. Well, I don't know if I got a favorite job or not, but it's all of it was, to me, people are coming in and you're grinding for them, they leave happy. That was good for me, You very seldom ever get somebody that was disappointed in how you ground it and all that, but no, I enjoyed all of it, It's hard work, but back in them days, people didn't mind the work. So in between customers, you had a break or something, or stuff that you need to do in the meal itself. Yeah, you could take a break, no problem. Yeah. And you could take a day off and still get paid for it. And then if you had to work overtime, then you did. And that's it. It's got to work both ways. Most of the customers to come and left satisfied, but I can remember one that came and asked him what he wanted in it. He said, put everything in it. So I put, I think you're getting some hog feed made. And I put soybean meal and salt and minerals in it. And when he went to pay for it, he didn't say to put that soybean in it. He didn't like the idea that when he said to put everything in it to make him some hog feed, so that's what I did, But no, most of the time it's, the customers were satisfied, But then you learn in place of business that you can bite your lip at times, and the customers, you may not always be right, but you don't argue with them, But it only takes one customer to go out and spread the word, and you lose customers, So, but if you got satisfied customers, they go out and do the advertisement for you. But anyway, I was there for 40 years and I retired. But somewhere along the way, they decided they're going to start paying us by the month. So they paid us a month in advance. And at the end of the 40 years, I retired, but I wasn't expecting to get paid for that last month because it's already been paid for. And Gene wrote me out a check for that month. I said, I've done been paid. He said, well, nothing says I can't pay you again. So he paid me for an extra month when I quit. That's the kind of people that I had to work, not for, I worked with,